So, if you're one of those people who's, wildly curious about how culture spread, especially those that started out seeming incredibly niche or hyper-specific to one place, then you should strap in. Because today, we are diving deep into a stack of sources that explain exactly how Japanese music genres, often historically dismissed as peripheral, or even dubbed a Galapagos culture, managed to achieve genuine, massive global influence.
That concept, Galapagos culture, is really central to this whole thing. It describes something that evolved in total isolation. And our mission in this deep dive is to analyze the mechanics of how that isolation was, well, shattered. When you look at artists like Japan, Deer on Grey, Perfume, and Baby Metal, they seem wildly different on the surface. But the sources we've got argue they all share a specific kind of sophisticated strategy for crossing cultural borders.
Okay, let's unpack that. The sources have this really provocative idea that their success isn't just about melody or catchy beats. It's that the music itself acts as a, quote, cultural code translation device. That's a heavy term. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means we have to look past the surface level, past the language barrier. This is really cultural sociology in action. If you just rely on, say, a lyrical translation, so much of the meaning is lost. Instead, this translation device, it relies almost entirely on nonverbal empathy, which is evoked through these hyper-specific visuals, fashion, complex themes, and physical performance.
So they're translating their cultural structure, their entire worldview, into a language that's universally readable, even if it's using these very Japanese-specific symbols.
Exactly. And this allows the core idea inside these genres, that cultural structure, to resonate globally in the 21st century. It's a method of cultural export that kind of bypasses the traditional rules of language and marketing.
All right, let's test that theory right away by looking at Visual-kei, V-kei. For listeners who might be new to this, V-kei is not just rock music. It's rock music as high spectacle.
It is the ultimate fusion of sound and image. Yeah. V-kei started in the late 1980s, pioneered by bands like X, who later became Japan and Buck Tick. They took the foundational structures of Western rock and metal, but then infused them with this distinctly Japanese aestheticism, extreme theatricality, and a very conscious, intentional presentation of gender ambiguity.
And the sources really emphasize this is not just fashion, right? This is an entire philosophy. The genre functions less as a musical style because V-kei bands are all over the map, metal, punk, pop, and more as a mechanism for presenting a whole worldview to the audience.
That's a critical analytical jump. The appeal of V-kei lies in what the sources are calling its representational nature. It's about more than the music. It's what the appearance represents, the elaborate costumes, the complex makeup that's not just external dressing. It symbolizes a reconstruction of the self, and it challenges the rigid expectations of the individual within society, especially within a conservative Japanese society.
And here's where it connects directly to the audience abroad. I found this quote from an overseas fan forum, J-Music Underground, that I think perfectly captures that appeal. Quote, "They are not pretending to be rock stars, they perform identity." What do the sources say about why that specific identity as performance was such a global draw?
That phrase, it just unlocks the whole postmodern resonance of it. It spoke to a global youth who were searching for subjective expression. But what's fascinating is how this universal message was understood differently depending on, the cultural mirror it hit.
Okay, give us those crucial geographic details, because I imagine V-kei landing in London was a very different experience than it landing in, say, San Diego.
Oh, entirely different. In Europe, the sources indicate that V-kei was understood as a pretty natural extension of existing Western subcultures. So we're talking gothic, androgyny, post-punk movements. It just fits so neatly into these established traditions of theatrical rebellion. It gave it cultural depth right away.
But in America, the sources suggest it was much more of a recontextualization.
Precisely. In the United States, V-kei was primarily understood and accepted through the framework of anime culture and what we might call otaku sensibility. And otaku sensibility, for anyone unfamiliar, is just a deep, specialized passion, a highly detailed engagement with a specific hobby or aesthetic. So American fans engaged with the V-kei visuals as this unique, stylized Japanese aesthetic tied to the look of other Japanese media. It wasn't about inheriting post-punk history for them. It was about engaging with this unique, constructed fantasy world.
So Europe saw history, America saw fantasy and aesthetic. But either way, that core idea of performing identity just clicked with global youth. That's a great analysis. Now let's shift gears to idol culture. Structurally, it's totally different, but it shares this ingenuity in cultural design. On the surface, the whole structure of Japanese idol groups, the rigorous training, the cuteness factor, the manufactured proximity, it all seems uniquely Japanese. So why is the global support for it so surprisingly strong?
Right, that paradox is solved by looking at the engineering behind the fan base. The success really stems from the explicit, meticulous design of the fan experience as a community.
And
It's not just a product, it's a designed participatory structure.
it's highly structural, yeah. We see
Hmm.
that in the foundational strategies like AKB48's whole model of idols you can meet, or Nogizaka 46 emphasizing an image of aesthetic purity or cleanliness.
Right.
But the masterclass in structural translation for a global audience has to be Baby Metal.
Absolutely. Baby metal is the primary case study here in structural cultural translation. Their massive and pretty unexpected success, like at the 2014 Sonosphere Festival, that was not an accident. It was a structural choice to embed the very specific concept of the Japanese idol directly into the globally accepted muscular framework of the metal genre. They created a perfectly engineered cultural bridge.
That's fascinating. So they didn't ask metal fans to suddenly get into J-pop. They just wrapped J-pop concepts inside a sound and visual code-heavy guitars, aggressive drumming that the metal community already understood.
A genius design. And what's really interesting is how the idol structure itself defines the fandom. The source material details this dual nature of idol culture as a, quote, fusion of religious ritual and technological community. That sounds abstract, so let's walk through the mechanic.
Yeah, religious ritual sounds pretty heavy. How does that comparison play out for a fan?
Well, you have the traditional, almost ritualistic parts, like the famous handshake events or the specific calls and responses at concerts. These are physical, almost ceremonial points of contact that foster this deep, almost devotional loyalty. But then this entire ritual structure is immediately digitized and distributed globally through platforms like streaming, SNS Lives, and fan apps.
So the traditional Japanese otaku community experience, that physical gathering, is now instantly accessible everywhere through tech.
Correct. And the digitization of these rituals effectively transforms the fans into what the sources describe as believers. This highly participatory ritualistic structure is what translated globally. It just dissolved hard cultural boundaries through the sheer power of participatory culture. You don't have to be in Japan to feel like you're part of the community, you're part of the ritual.
Okay, so we've got the worldview in Vikai and the community design and idol culture. But none of this crossover could have happened without the global gateway that came up in the 2000s. Overwhelmingly digital media, platforms like YouTube, and specifically in Japan, Niku.
Right, and the media revolution wasn't just about distribution, it was about empowerment. These platforms let fan activity itself become an essential extension of the musical experience. The power dynamic shifted entirely.
We're talking everything from fan-created subtitles and translations to reaction videos, fan fiction, doujinshi, those are fan-made comics, and a high-level cosplay. The fan is no longer just a passive recipient of the content.
And the sources point specifically to the explosion of reaction culture as a total game changer for overseas fandom visibility. It generated this crucial new mechanism. Viewing is participation.
That still sounds a bit abstract. How is just watching someone else react to a music video a form of active participation?
Because it makes the overseas fandom visible to itself and to the world. Seeing someone in Paris or São Paulo reacting with intense emotion to a Japanese artist, it validates that connection for everyone watching. The mere act of documenting and sharing that enjoyment became this active social form of engagement that spread the culture virally. The sources label this the activation of the audience, and that leads directly to the co-creation of cultural translation. The fans are re-editing, translating, and diffusing the culture themselves in real time.
And that level of co-creation brings us to the deeper cultural resonance, which I think unites both Vikai and idol culture, through a surprising shared theme for overseas fans, the fluidity of identity.
Yes. This is a profound commonality that the research highlights. The fans who resonate most strongly with these genres often connect with the inherent fluidity of gender and identity that the artists present. It's a subtle kind of cultural mirroring.
In Vikai, that means the overt androgynous aesthetic. I mean, we look at foundational figures like Yoshiki of X-Japan or Height Y of Larkin Musial, who are male but intentionally wore and performed with these deeply feminine representations. They use fashion to communicate an idea of self beyond traditional gender.
And that intentional ambiguity was embraced worldwide as this powerful statement about the post-gender era. It provided a clear, recognizable visual language for identity as performance. VKai inherently got this and positioned itself as a genre for those who reject society's boxes.
And idol culture, even though it often emphasizes cuteness and traditional feminine aesthetics, provides a similar, if structurally reversed, commentary on power and identity.
Absolutely. Again, just look at the baby metal format. You have young female idols, often associated with innocence and a controlled image, who are ritualistically overturning the traditionally male-centric, aggressive metal scene. This structure opens the door to a really powerful feminist reinterpretation for overseas fans.
So the music isn't just entertainment, it becomes a vehicle for cultural commentary on gender roles, on power structures.
Precisely. The underlying critical insight the sources identify is that both VKai and idol culture successfully convert these highly specific forms of denational and degendered expression into a universal post-national empathetic structure. By degendered, we mean expressions that deliberately blur or move beyond binary gender norms. By denational, we mean the ideas resonate so universally that the context of Japan becomes secondary to this bigger concept of identity exploration.
That gives them a very distinct and incredibly valuable position in the global music landscape, especially when we, inevitably compare this to K-pop, which achieved massive global success later in the 2010s.
And that comparison is crucial for defining Japanese subculture music's unique value. While K-pop demonstrated just unparalleled global optimization, the sources note that Japanese subculture survived and thrived by using a fundamentally different grammar for engaging its audience.
So what defines that grammar? If K-pop is all about precision, what is J-pop subculture about?
It really boils down to a core philosophical difference: precision versus intervention. K-pop is often celebrated for the precision of a completed product. Everything, the choreography, the sound mixing, the marketing, it's all flawless, streamlined, and globally optimized. Japanese subculture, on the other hand, actively values incompleteness, proximity, and most importantly, a large margin for fan intervention.
That's such a compelling idea. The lure of the unfinished. So fans aren't just buying the record, they are buying into the potential to help finish the cultural object itself.
Exactly. Overseas fans of indie VKai or underground idols are often most attracted to that open, unfinished nature. They feel like they have genuine access to an agency in the cultural object, whether that means creating translation subtitles or designing doujinshi that expand the lore. It feels less like mass consumption and more like co-authorship.
And beyond that structural difference, there's the emotional grammar.
Yes. J-pop's melodic focus and its commitment to these evocative, emotionally resonant lyrics, often focused on universal themes of yearning or sadness, are received by overseas audiences as a form of exotic nostalgia. It offers something intimate, distinct, and emotionally rich, setting it apart from the globally standardized focus of modern maximalist pop.
So to summarize this whole journey, we started with genres that were highly specific, nearly isolated. But through careful cultural code translation, community design, and massive audience activation online, these niche forms have successfully moved past being mere Japanese culture.
They are now truly co-owned and co-created. They're evolving globally. We're seeing a shift from mere imitation, like a Western band trying to look vaguely V-key, to genuine co-creation. You see examples like authentically Brazilian VKai bands or French underground idol events that just spring up independently.
The translation device worked, and now the culture is structurally integrated into the global conversation.
The essential nature of subculture music really lies in that construction of empathy through multi-layered translation. It's a powerful, circular process where the original Japanese expression is reconfigured through the mirror of other cultures, and then new sensibility and new meaning are affixed back onto it, driving the art form forward.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener. Since this culture is now defined by the co-creation between artists and fans, with that large margin for intervention we talked about, what aspects of your own local culture right now, maybe a local music scene, a regional fashion trend, or even a specific local meme culture, are now being translated, re-edited, and given brand new, possibly unexpected meaning by global fandoms online? It's a cycle of translation and reauthorship that really never stops.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.